On the 11th of July, Russia nearly shot down its own passenger plane.
This is the pilot of the aircraft speaking. I repeat, this is a civilian route, clearance confirmed. We are being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
Air defense opened fire over the Moscow region. There are explosions in the sky, flames below. What's going on there? It probably overheated. In the sky over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow route.
This is not a target. There are people here. I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Record this. Altitude maintained. Route approved. We are under heavy fire.
There's a fire in a residential building in the Moscow suburbs. People run out into the streets in panic. In Belgorod, a Pantsir missile flew straight into a multi-story building. There are wounded. In Dubna, a new attack on the Kronstadt drone factory. In Tula, there were strikes on a defense design bureau where air defense systems are being developed. Kursk, Tver, Penza, loud explosions. A 5-story building on fire in Pushkin. A thermal power plant exploded in Penza, part of the city without power.
The power plant is burning. So it's the substation there.
Today is the 11th of July. These are no longer pinpoint strikes, this is chaos inside Russia itself, and it's gaining momentum.
The smoke has gotten thicker.
Across the entire territory of Russia, explosions, fires, and strikes. Moscow is in chaos. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled, airports are paralyzed, thousands of people are sleeping on the floor, crying, fighting for tickets. And this isn't just a glitch, it's a complete aviation collapse costing over $300 million. And all of this is the result of Ukrainian special operations. The SBU, GER, and the armed forces of Ukraine are striking the system with precision and power. Just as Israel has been doing for decades. Meanwhile, there are massive attacks on military airfields of strategic and tactical aviation. Sapsan, Ukrainian ballistic missiles are striking Moscow and St. Petersburg. Drones are in action, strike groups are operating, saboteurs are at work. This isn't defense, it's a hunt. The armed forces of Ukraine are destroying Russia. Operations like the Spiderweb are becoming a reality on Russian territory. Somewhere a warehouse is burning, somewhere equipment is exploding, somewhere generals are dying. And behind all this is a new military strategy. Right now, we'll discuss this with a person who knows how the Israeli army works, how Mossad, special forces, and command centers operate under constant threat. On air is Grigory Tamar, a reserve officer of the Israel Defense Forces. This is going to be very powerful.
Hello, I'm very glad to see you.
The feeling is mutual. Grigory, as a former officer of the Israel Defense Forces, please give your assessment of what is happening now on Russian territory after the Spiderweb special operation. Do you think this marks a new stage in drone warfare and accordingly in the war between intelligence services?
When Operation Spiderweb was announced, I said at the time, friends, the operation is not over. This is only the beginning and it will continue to develop. We will learn about many more, so to speak, glorious pages in the military history of the Ukrainian armed forces and the various special services that exist in your country. And what you have just described is simply the next stage of Operation Spiderweb. It is a part of it. Operation Spiderweb is not over. It has only just begun. It had a starting point. At least the beginning is obvious to the general public. When it actually started, we don't know either, and we are unlikely to ever find out. Maybe if in 20 years one of your distinguished officers writes memoirs, perhaps in such a situation we will find out. In any case, as you quite rightly pointed out, Ukraine is demonstrating essentially the same thing that Israel demonstrated, that we are living in an era of different kinds of war. Wars now develop differently, they happen differently. This era of brute force, which Russia relied on so heavily when it launched its large-scale aggression against your country, is becoming a thing of the past. No one fights the way they did during World War II anymore. Now we are witnessing a different methodology where essentially intelligence is valued above brute force. And this leads to results. Sometimes the reason for this is limited resources, as is the case for you. Sometimes the reason is certain political constraints, as we have in Israel. But that's not what matters. The result is what's important. That with these kinds of asymmetric responses, when a creative approach is combined with very systematic planning, when significant intellectual and material resources are invested in advancing, planning the operation, in development, in managing the operation, we can see what this can lead. And I want to point out that as of now, we still don't know what real damage this has caused on Russian territory. We don't know how many drones hit their targets, what they blew up, and what they did. But even if not a single Ukrainian drone, I want to emphasize this, even if not a single Ukrainian drone hit any target, we can already say that the Russian Federation is suffering enormous material losses. This is a very powerful blow to the prestige of the authorities. There are propaganda and political consequences, and this is actually pushing the Russian economy to the brink of collapse. And that's even before we've counted the hits. I want to emphasize this point.
Dear audience, please like this video. Write in the comments what you think about this chaos, about the military strikes on Russian territory. Subscribe to Grigory Tamara's YouTube channel and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dasha. There are 700,000 of us. I thank you for this number. We reached this together. And in the comments, write where you're watching us from your location. Grigory, when they say 20 billion in losses, more than $250 million just from the results of the aviation collapse, from the aviation industry's panic. From a military political standpoint, how much of a blow is this to the regime? Because after this, the Minister of Transport suddenly and unexpectedly resigned.
Well, without a doubt, this is a powerful blow to the prestige of the authorities. It would honestly be strange to deny this or to try, to cover it up with a fig leaf, shamefully attempting to hide it. I want to point out that all these figures, economists are now citing as economic and financial losses are completely aberrant. There are so many consequences that simply cannot be calculated going forward. Just imagine, for example, Russian citizens planning their lives in the future, and the person will have to ask themselves, should I fly or not fly on an airplane? They'll think, well, Ukraine might strike with drones again, so I won't take the risk, I'll just stay home. Now imagine, on the scale of a huge country, how many people will make that choice and how much this will reduce. I'm just giving this as an example to show that the impact of such actions is unpredictable. And sometimes it's like a domino effect, it starts to collapse. And this could be one of those triggers. I don't know what this will ultimately lead to. I'm not a prophet, but it's obvious that this is a very powerful blow to the pillars of Russian statehood in the broadest sense of the word. We're witnessing this firsthand right now. And by the way, incidentally, the suicide or murder, we don't know what really happened of the Minister of Transport, is a vivid illustration of this. And by the way, I want to tell you, every intelligence agency has its own professional signature, its own traditions, its own professional characteristics, right? For example, Israel operates in certain ways, right? And I don't know why this person died. What the cause of his death was, I don't know. We simply don't have the information. The official version is suicide. But maybe he was eliminated. Who eliminated? Was it his own people? Or maybe it was your people who did it, right? Well, you can ask these kinds of questions, can't you? To create the fog of war. And why not? The transport minister of a warring state is a legitimate target. Why not? Well, I don't know. We don't know the answer to the question of under what circumstances his life ended, right? So we can only ask these questions rhetorically, and we won't know the answer for now. And of course, we are not going to take the official version from the Russian Federation as the ultimate truth or as a definitive answer. I think that's clear to anyone.
Yes, Grigory, there's already information circulating that this was a struggle between the Kovalchuks and the Rothenbergs, and one side won while the other lost. And as a result, the minister was eliminated. This version is now spreading widely in Telegram channels and opposition Russian media.
Well, again, for now, I would treat all these versions as nothing more than just versions. Because the very same people spreading them, believe me, don't have any more sources of information than we do. I say this with full responsibility. That's it. And as for, I'd also like to point out another thing here. When the war started, well, everyone abroad, everyone was in shock. No one expected it, no one believed it, and so on. And I remember it very well. At noon on the 24th of February, I wrote an open letter to Russian officers, which was circulated on social media, calling for an immediate end to the criminal war, to stop the aggression. I appealed to their professional duty, to their professional conscience, to universal human values, and so on. As a reaction, so to speak, I received a huge wave of mockery and ridicule. And they said, in 3 days we'll be in Kiev, so come visit us in Kiev then. We'll have a drink here and then we'll discuss everything. And I told them, listen, we had a great Israeli military leader, General Ehud Olmert, who later became prime minister. He had many aphorisms. He spent his whole life at war. And he had a saying, you always know how you start a war. You never know how you will finish it. And I told them, listen, if you think this is a one-sided game, you are very much mistaken. You don't understand who you've started the war with. There are very few nations and peoples who have entered the international, lexicon. Any cultured person in any country in the world knows what a Kazakh is, right? Say Kazakh to an American, if he's well-read and educated, he'll understand. Even though it's not an English word, there are very few like that. Well, you can take the Japanese, for example, samurai, right? But there aren't many such examples. And I told them, you started a war with the Kazakhs, though you even realize what you're doing. Don't you understand? After all, the war will come to your own home. It's only a matter of time before you get a response. And so when, I don't even remember exactly when, maybe a year or a year and a half ago, Ukrainian drones started flying into Russian territory. They were like, but why us? What do we have to do with this? But we've been bombing Ukrainian territory, wiping towns off the map for 30 years. So it's allowed to hit us too. We can get hit as well. That wasn't part of the deal. You see what I mean, right? They didn't agree to this with Putin because Putin promised them something completely different. Putin promised them Kyiv in 3 days. That's it. And of course, I want to tell you, all your successes in this war are the result of a competitive advantages, the quality of your soldiers, the human material, compared to the Russian one. Just recently, I had a recording on my channel. It hasn't been published yet, but this material will be released in the coming days. A Ukrainian officer spoke, and he described this evolution, how from the ground up, they learned to defeat the Russian army not by numbers, but by skill, because it was impossible to outnumber them. And all your achievements, look, for example, at the Black Sea Fleet. Your country, which doesn't have a combat fleet, has neutralized the Russian Black Sea Fleet as a combat unit, forced it into harbor, and now it has no decisive significance. By using completely new tactical methods, no one has ever fought at sea like this before. Essentially, Ukraine is a landlocked country. It has no history of a naval fleet. It has emerged during this war. As for your intelligence services, you are now demonstrating a level that matches that of Israeli intelligence, which is considered the best in the world. You're doing it just as well as we do. The results are impressive. And this is not the end yet. So when people were making predictions, counting the number of divisions, the number of tanks, you know what that is? The Israelis defeated the coalition of Arab countries and the Soviet Union in the Six-Day War. Even though those forces outnumbered Israel by 7, 8, or even 12 times, depending on the metric. So, as the saying goes, you have to fight not with numbers, but with skill. By the way, this was said by a Russian military commander in his own policy.
Grigory, a new anti-record, Russia has launched more than 740 drones and missiles at Ukraine in the past 24 hours. This is the official statistic from the General Staff. And in general, when you talk to military analysts, everyone says that Russia has greatly increased its production capacity and that it will attack 2 or 3 times a week with more than 500 drones on a regular basis. And now Magyar has officially stated that we must be prepared for 1,000 drones per day launched from the territory of the Russian Federation. In other words, missile and drone terror. I'd like to ask you, how can this be countered? Does this mean we need to increase the number of mobile groups or use interceptor drones to take down Russian drones? Or is it about systematic ongoing ballistic and drone attacks on Russian territory to turn their lives into a nightmare? What do you think?
As a military historian, I'd like to give you a few historical examples. At one time, when Hitler tried to crush the British Empire, he subjected English cities and London above alto aerial terror. And he tried to break the spirit of the British people. And Churchill addressed the nation with an interesting, well, it's a democratic country after all, so feedback is expected there. The thing is, when Britain's air defense and British fighter planes fought the Germans in the air and shot down German planes, there were cases when the wreckage fell and people died, even though these were already downed German planes, and there were quite a few such cases. And Churchill addressed the people with a request, please write to the editorial office of the Times newspaper, if I'm not mistaken, and say whether you want us to continue shooting down German planes or, on the contrary, maybe we shouldn't let the air raid siren sound, let people hide in bomb shelters. Maybe in the end this could mean fewer casualties. No one ever knew. There had never been such an example in history. And Londoners sent so much mail that the system collapsed. The British Postal Service was in crisis, where they demanded that enemy planes be shot down, regardless of the possible casualties. It doesn't matter. The main thing is shoot them down. When we were at war with Iran recently, we struck exclusively at Iran's military targets, nuclear infrastructure sites, and symbols of power. The Iranians, on the other hand, deliberately targeted major metropolitan areas. I didn't see a single Israeli citizen who said, oh, stop this as soon as possible. We're tired of running to bomb shelters. We're scared there. Everyone was saying, let the army finish its job. Let them see this through to the end. I am certain that the citizens of Ukraine are in no way in this regard any less persistent in their determination, their will to win, and their desire for independence than the examples I mentioned earlier. And as for the means of struggle, you are absolutely right. What's needed here is a systematic approach to build a new form of air defense. Let me tell you, when the war began for us on the 7th of October, 2023, and then on the 8th of October, the very next day, Hezbollah attacked us from Lebanese territory. They started actively using drones. We have never seen such large-scale use of drones against our territory before that moment. And to some extent, this caught us off guard, and there were significant casualties. The house of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was attacked by a drone. Fortunately, no one was hurt. He wasn't there at the time. A barracks was attacked, a mess hall where recruits were having dinner, and 7 young men were killed by a drone. And these are just a few of the most striking examples. And Israel approached solving this problem comprehensively, completely changing its technological and systemic response to this threat. And when the Iranians recently tried to attack us with drones, they launched 100, but only 1 drone reached Israeli territory and hit a single civilian building. This means it is necessary to restructure and optimize the air defense system, despite having specific resource limitations. This is a major problem. You need to sound the alarm and reach out to all your Western friends. And it's not just the Americans. Europeans can do much more than they are currently doing, much more. This is above all a European problem. It's Europe whose house is on fire, not Trump's house burning on his lawn. That's why the Germans, the British, the French, the Italians, and the Swedes, they all can do more. I'm not mentioning the Czechs, because the Czechs are already doing more than anyone could expect from any country. That's it. Although, why didn't I mention it? Because the Czechs have excellent military propaganda. So all these countries can do much more for you and are obligated to, because you are protecting them. That's it. And regarding your remark about striking Russian cities, I've been saying for a long time, listen, all of this will start to end when you blow the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, the General Staff, and Lubyanka to hell, just level them to the ground. And believe me, that will most certainly have a very significant and sobering effect on everyone involved. And you can already do this today. You possess the formidable means of firepower that unequivocally allow you to accomplish this. In a profound sense, you truly need to pay significantly less attention to your Western friends and decisively do what absolutely needs to be done, what you genuinely believe is inherently right, not what the White House or indeed any other governmental house ultimately decides is good or bad.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Grigory, you've raised a very important issue. And as a military historian and a reserve officer of the Israel Defense Forces, this is the position of NATO. This is the position of America. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, came out and said, we produce in a year as many munitions as Russia does in 3 months. And we simply don't have enough capacity. And now Trump has turned the transfer of Patriot missiles to Ukraine into I don't know, a whole series. It's just unbelievable. First the House blocked it, then they blamed the Pentagon, then Trump came out and said, no, we will provide them. Before that, he spoke with a journalist whose husband is fighting. This all takes a very long time. And so we watch all of this, how Trump's opinion shifts dramatically from Putin is a great guy to Putin has made me angry, and we don't even know what he'll do next.
Zelensky wore the wrong suit, and a week later he's a good guy again. And, well, yes, the man, yes. Listen, well, yes. Listen, but if you think that Trump is only mocking you, you're mistaken. Let me give you an example. So we're at war with Iran. A ceasefire is announced. After that, Iran launches a missile strike on the peaceful city of Beersheba. 4 Israelis are killed. 4 Israelis. They were sitting in a protected room, but protected rooms are not designed to withstand the direct hit from a ballistic missile with a 650-kilogram warhead. 4 people are killed. Our government scrambles an air group, 50 fighter jets. They're flying to strike Tehran. Halfway there, the planes turned back because Trump called our Minister of Defense. Well, you understand the level of national humiliation and so on, right? I mean, Trump, as they say, is a problematic person. Yes, controversial. But listen, we didn't elect him, and that's just how it is. That's the case for both you and us. Unfortunately, we don't have any other partner in the White House. This is the reality, whether we like it or not. We have to work with him for another 3.5 years. He has negative qualities. He has positive qualities, like any person. We need to try to make the most of his positive qualities and somehow smooth out the negative one. But I want to emphasize once again this statement by the Europeans that they supposedly can't keep up with the Russian Federation in terms of capabilities. It's a disgrace, a shame. It's shameless cynicism. I just don't want to lower the level of my speech. Out of respect for your channel, I'm not resorting to foul language, although it's very tempting in this case.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, let me just give you an example. First of all, there are more Europeans than Americans. Well, the population of the European Union is larger than that of the USA. They have greater production capacity than the United States. These are absolute industrial giants like Germany, the United Kingdom, Sweden, France, and Italy. This is a highly developed industrial country. I'm not even mentioning such, well, in quotes, small countries as Austria, the Netherlands, and so on. Yes, Norway. Right. And, I want to give you an example. Since the beginning of the war has been going on for 20 months now. The Israeli defense industry has increased its output, its productivity by more than 100%, more than double. Since the moment from the momento, Israel has increased its production by more than 2 times. And we are a rather small country, while Europe has increased its arms manufacturing capacity since the large-scale aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation by only 30%. How is it that great, powerful Europe couldn't find the resources to at least double its production? Well, of course, they won't have it. Of course, they will lag behind Russia. Not only are they falling behind Russia, but they also allow Russia to trade in hydrocarbons. And meanwhile, Ukraine is shielding European capitals from these hordes that are advancing westward, openly stating that this is their goal today. They don't even try to hide. I also want to say that we can actually view some of the positive changes that have taken place in Berlin under the new government in a favorable light. But overall, of course, Europe. And here, by the way, I actually agree with Trump. In what way? That this is first and foremost a European problem. And the Europeans are behaving unacceptably in this situation. They could have given you everything you need to win, except for some very narrow niche product. Well, for example, communications equipment, intelligence data, things like that, which only the Americans can provide right now, since there are no alternatives at the moment. But overall, everything else, aviation, air defense systems, maybe not the full range, but the vast majority, as well as the necessary armored forces, artillery, and various other systems. So, in other words, if the task had been set well, again, you have to understand, they have other problems in Europe. Europe is gradually turning into an Arab caliphate. Well, I get it, but who created this problem for them? They created it themselves.
Right now, there are 2 strategies. Trump's strategy is to first sit down at the negotiating table and make a deal with Putin. But what can you even negotiate about with terrorist number 1? And strategy 2 is to fight, win, and essentially reach the borders of 1991 And now former Defense Minister Reznikov has said that Ukrainian society is ready for a long and exhausting war until victory. This is very important. Grigory, considering Israel's experience, how do you think Ukraine can win today? I mean, we fought, but in the end, we won and we destroyed Putin and his army.
You see, the thing is, when citizens in Israel or Ukraine look at their wars, it seems to them, as the saying goes, that the whole world revolves around. That's not quite the case. Now, look at what Trump is trying to do in the Middle East right now. And I ask you to pay close attention now, because this is directly related to the Ukrainian issue. He is now building a certain structure in which, for the first time in a long while, Israel is not the main linchpin. For the Americans, it's important, but not the main one. And the main linchpin is Saudi Arabia. And so, onto this Saudi Arabian core, he's stringing together all the other elements of this structure. He's trying to, right? That includes Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Bahrain, and Qatar. That's what he'd like, right? And Morocco, and eventually, potentially, Azerbaijan, and so on. He wants to bring all these countries into the so-called Abraham Accords. As of now, at this very moment, the countries that are part of these accords are Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. He wants to expand this and give Saudi Arabia the leading role. Now, who is Israel's main partner in the world after the United States? After the United States, Israel's main partner is India, our most important geopolitical partner. So I look at this and ask myself, this whole structure that he then wants to unite with India, what is he building it for? Is it just because he wants to play with building blocks? He is building this with one single goal, an objective to direct it against China. And when I say direct it against China, I don't mean like Putin to send tanks forward. I mean a completely different formula of economic, geopolitical, and other forms of pressure. In other words, for him, the ultimate goal is the struggle with China. I want to emphasize not war, but struggle. In this paradigm of his, Russia is only important to him in the sense that it is an ally of China, and it is crucial for him to pull Russia away from China. He is now actively trying to feed the nation of Ukraine to Russia, and in this particular way, to pull Russia completely out of China's geopolitical orbit. But he doesn't understand, because Americans generally have limited imagination and are rather narrow-minded. He doesn't grasp the peculiarities of Putin's mentality. He thinks that if he offers Putin a very generous, gift, and in return asks Putin for some relatively minor concessions, then Putin, logically, since he's being offered so much, will agree. But Putin is a person with a different mentality. He can't agree even to this minor concession. That's why the idea that you can reach an agreement with Putin on terms convenient for him is a bluff. It's impossible. Putin is incapable of making these compromises, just as Hamas is incapable of making compromises. This is the very nature of terrorist organization. That's why I believe that in the end, all these negotiation processes and attempts will burst like a soap opera. It's only a matter of time, and I think it won't take long, because Trump doesn't have much patience. And at the moment when it bursts, then Trump will really fly into a rage and, yes, give Ukraine what Ukraine currently lacks to win in terms of weapons. But there is not enough to win. It's not enough for you to just get a lot of weapons now. You have one problem that neither Trump nor Europe can solve. This is your internal problem, and you will have to solve it yourself. The reason why the Russians are still not in Kyiv is that when you were attacked, your people stood up to the death for their freedom and fought in a way that no one in the world expected could even happen. 3.5 years have passed. To a large extent, the population, the people, have lost trust in the authorities and lost their motivation to resist. Right now, your government needs to come out to the people and completely reconsider this form of relationship, so that people once again feel that they need to join the army, that they need to continue defending their country. If this doesn't happen, no matter how much weaponry you are given, it won't help, because it is the people who win, not the weapons.
So do we need new mobilization processes or a contract army, in your opinion?
No, a contract army. A contract army will not solve your problem. It never has. That's a separate discussion. By the way, I conducted research on this topic, and I am a strong opponent of having a contract army in Israel. And those who talk about a contract army have no idea what they're talking about. A contract army is suitable for those states that are not engaged in large-scale wars. I'm not just talking about mobilization right now. Mobilization is just a part, merely a fragment of the problem I'm trying to highlight for you now. I'm talking about the broader perspective on this process. There was a war in Israel just now. People were rushing to Israel. There was a rescue operation to bring back those 150,000 Israelis who were abroad, to get them into Israel. No one was trying to leave Israel. Do you understand? I'm not saying this as in, oh, how wonderful the Israelis are. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm just describing this as an example. And I know personally what was happening in Ukrainian society when the war began. Those lines at the military enlistment offices, which everyone saw all over the world, those people who were eager to get to the front and were ready to tear the occupier apart with their bare teeth. So in a sense, when the authorities demonstrated disregard for their own people, a lack of respect for them, this needs to change now. The authorities need to find the inner strength to address the people in a humane way and convey the necessity of continuing to resist. You have the government that you have. You chose it yourselves. No one appointed to you from outside. This is the government you have. And for now, you won't have another one. So with this government, something needs to happen for change to occur.
Grigory, do you see that Russia still has the capacity for offensive operations? Because we see that the summer offensive campaign is in full swing, and when talking to Ukrainian military analysts, they say that there will also be a serious new phase of strikes in the fall. And in general, how long do you think the Russian war machine is prepared to keep fighting today? So are we facing a very long, exhausting war that could last several more years, or maybe even up to a decade?
As the experience of the history of wars teaches us, all the wars that Russia as a civilization has lost were lost for reasons when the logistics and economic systems could not cope with the military historical challenge that history posed to Russia at that time. Both the Crimean campaign of the 19th century, when they were unable to supply the troops sufficiently due to severe backwardness in terms of railroads, and the Russo-Japanese War, when there was essentially a collapse of logistics, and World War I, when industry could not cope with the task of supplying the army with what it needed. All these cases are not examples of military defeat per se, but rather instances where logistics and the economy failed to meet the demands that history placed upon them. As of today, as long as Putin can keep printing his petrodollars, so to speak, he will keep throwing them into the furnace of war, along with the paid-for lives of his citizens, whom he regards as mere cogs in the machine. He doesn't consider them human because no one treats people this way. And he will keep throwing them into the furnace of war. And here, so to speak, everything is in the hands of your Western friend. If they really wanted to collapse the Russian economy, they could have done it long ago. It's actually quite simple to do. The problem is that everyone is making money off of this, and your Western friends are the first among them. Putin has managed to build a mirror economy that has integrated very well into the global economic system. The good news for you here might be that if, after all, my version is correct, and the main thing for the Americans is the fight against China, and they see Putin merely as an element in this struggle, then when he fails to meet their expectations, that's when perhaps some powerful economic tools will be brought into play in order to, so to speak, change the whole situation. As for the possibility of Russia launching an offensive, I want to tell you, for as long as I can remember, this war has been going on, and it's been going on for so long now that it's almost impossible to believe. I remember, for example, you defeated the Russians near Kyiv in the spring. They fled, then they regrouped their forces, and the summer offensive began. And that's it. They said, that's it. This summer we'll put an end to the Kyiv regime. We'll finish them off. We'll break through the front. We'll break out into the operational space. Okay, that was 3 years ago. There you go. And every time, every 6 months, we hear about some terrifying Russian offensive that's supposed to wipe you out. And then another round of carnage begins. Both sides take losses. And in the end, we end up, it's basically the same story repeating, like the boy who cried woo, you know. When for a small town that had no significance at Allen back then, They explained to me, no, you don't understand. Once Bakhmut falls, everything will collapse for them. Their front will crumble, will break through here, coming from the flank, from the rear, from above, from below. Everything will just... And I said, listen, are you idiots? What are you doing? What are you doing? People don't fight wars like this. I mean, what is this? And, I want to tell you, as a military historian, I devoted a lot of effort at one time to trying to understand what happened on the 22nd of June, 1941. How did Stalin build such a massive for so many tanks, planes, artillery, personnel, and yet it all collapsed like a house of cards? I read one expert and another, this theory, that theory. But I understood everything on the 24th of February. It all comes down to one sentence, because they are idiots. Do you understand? Idiots. That's what they are, just like they fought throughout the entire history. And they fought by throwing people into the furnace of war without any regard for human life and without sparing sources, as they say. God didn't deny them. That's all there is to it. That's the whole secret. And the only way to counter this brute force is with qualitative superiority, intellectual, motivational, in training, in qualifications, and in technical means, if so to speak. The help of your Western partners allows for it.
Grigory Tamarov, reserve officer of the Israel Defense Forces. That was very powerful. Grigory, thank you, and I hope to see you again soon on my YouTube channel. Friends, please like this video, subscribe to Grigory Tamar's YouTube channel and to my YouTube channel, Dasha. Grigory, thank you so much.
All the best. I wish you victory.